Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening and taking an hour of your time. We appreciate your being here. I am Alyssa DeFilippo, Parents Helping Parents Program Manager for Connections California. We are a statewide online resource and information hub for transition to adulthood and adult service. So if you've heard about the self-determination program and you want to learn more, you are at the right place. This evening, we have Kristianna Morales, who is past director of the Self-Determination Program at Disability Voices United and currently directs the Self-Determination Institute, leading research, thought leadership, and training initiatives to advance civil rights and strengthen self-directed services for people with disabilities. As a parent, advocate, and expert in disability rights, she draws from personal and professional experience to drive systemic change and promote equity in the self-determination program. So thank you, Kristianna, for being here, and thank you all for coming. And I'm going to turn it over to Kristianna.
Hello, all, and wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen as I introduce myself here. Um, One of the things that I think I have lots of hats that I wear, but for me, the most important as I'm doing these kind of trainings and talking about what the self-determination program is that I am a parent of a 24-year-old who is in his fourth year of SDP. So while I'm a independent facilitator and I do training for self-determination, I am a retired special education advocate that I did for almost 3 decades. Um, what when my son went into self-determination, I fell in love with the program. And so this is really a program that is near and dear to my heart. And so I'm here to just tell you a little bit about what the heck this thing is, because for a lot of people, it may be the first time you're hearing about it. We call it sometimes the best kept secret in regional center services. So when you're trying to decide, well, what the heck is self-determination? I ask people, do you want to have more choices when it comes to your regional center services? Do you want to hire people that you know and that you trust? Do you want to have more ability to create your own plan and to be more involved in what your services are and to have more flexibility? And with all of those, would you be willing to take more responsibility on in order to have that? So if you answered yes to these, then you might want to know that at the regional center, you have two options of getting services. And not everybody knows this. Self-determination is relatively new. It became available July of 2021 to everybody. There was a pilot program before that. But so, in the grand scheme, it's a relatively new program, but everybody that is a traditional system service of regional center is eligible to do this. It's your choice. So you can either be in the traditional system or you can be in the self-determination program. So what is the self-determination program? We call it SDP for short because it's such a long name. Um, what this means is that participants in the self-determination program have budget and employer authority. This is a big deal. This is about civil rights. So it's a big picture thing that goes beyond just the self-determination program, but self-determination as a theory. Self-determination as a theory started with a philosophy that what motivates people what better motivates people comes from inside, intrinsic motivation versus external. And this evolved into things like positive psychology, moving away from deficit-based assessments into strength-based assessments. And they started tying this into the rights of people with disabilities. Uh, and what they found was that people with disabilities were given so few options, so few choices. And when they started giving them choices and options, the outcomes were so much better. And that's really where we're going with the idea of self-determination. It's about the five principles, which is you have the people with disabilities have the freedom, authority, responsibility, support, and confirmation to run the things in their lives, to have in their lives. Now, a lot of these things other people have and we take for granted, and we don't realize what a big deal some of these are. And when I look at my son, I say he should have the same rights. He should have these same rights to choose where he's going to live, what he wants to do with his life, who's going to take care of him, who's going to be with him when he's going out and doing things. So these became really important. So for me, it is not just about the services that you get, it is a bigger picture, which is I want my son to have the opportunity to try things. Maybe it didn't work. Maybe he learned something from it. Move on. He's going to try new things. And that gives him the ability to grow, to learn new things, to make decisions, to become the most independent that he can be. For our family, self-determination program has been life-changing. And so I want to talk a little bit because I think it's hard to understand what is SDP? What is the self-determination program without a story? Like, what does it mean? What does it look like? So I thought I want to share a little bit about what our journey was and what his story looks like. So he was in the regional center for many, many years and had services kind of along the way. When he got to transition age, which I think you all know and have heard this term, which is the drop off. We all know about the drop off. He graduated high school and there was kind of this drop off. All the school district services ended and he was offered a program through the regional center for creative arts, and he was miserable. He didn't like it. It was not at the time of day. He's a night owl. It was very rigid because what we do know from the traditional system is the vendored services, they have a program design that they have to stick to. They must follow those program designs. There's not a lot of flexibility. So at that point we thought, okay, this isn't working. We've got to find something else. And that's when I decided I'd heard of the self-determination program before, but decided, okay, I think it's time I really need to take a look at this. So we did. And he ended up joining the self-determination program. I'll talk a little bit about what the process was in a moment. But what happened was we started with that person-centered plan. Now, you are not required to do a person-centered plan to transition into self-determination program, but I highly, highly recommend it. This person-centered plan was the first time that he was really asked, well, what do you want to do? What do you see your life being like? What do you see a perfect day for you? What do you see as a terrible day? Let's look at what are the things that are really important to you. And then we start looking at, well, what do we need to help him get there? Which is a very, very different mentality from the assessment, which would focus on what you can't do, what his limitations were. And the idea of a very medical model, which is in the world of medical model, you have a diagnosis, you have a goal and a treatment, and you meet those goals, and at some point it kind of ends. Well, what we know with our loved ones is there's some things that aren't going to end. He's going to have ups and downs and things that he needs supports with his entire life. And that's part of why he gets services for long-term disability. These are services he's going to need his whole life. So this person-centered plan really gave us an outline of what does he want to do and how do we make that happen. So one of the things that he wanted to do was he likes to play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you guys have heard of this game, but it's one of those games where you play with a group of friends, and there was a local comic book shop that had Dungeons and Dragons, and they had all these tables set up, and you could go and people would play. And he wanted to go and do this, but he really couldn't navigate it on his own. He needed some support. He needed social support for this. He didn't have a way to drive to get there. And he had tried every single social skills program that the regional center had to offer, and he kind of astutely at one point said to me, you know, Mom, the only thing I have in common with them is that we all have autism. How am I supposed to learn to socialize with people I have nothing in common with? And I thought, oh, pretty smart. He should probably be teaching all of us. Um, so what ended up happening once he got his person center plan done and his spinning plan done is we were able to hire somebody who liked to play Dungeons and Dragons, because I got to tell you, when you're in your 20s, you don't want your mom going anywhere with you. That is just not cool. We were able to hire somebody who liked to play Dungeons and Dragons. He happened to be a psychology major. Um, he would come pick up my son. They would go to the comic book store. Well, first they had to go pick up their burgers at Burger King because that was their favorite thing. Then they would go to the comic book store. They would play, and they would go, and he would drive him home. Um, at that point, then we realized, oh, he could use a little bit more purposeful social skills training. So we asked the young man who was working with him, hey, would you be interested in being trained to do some social skills? And he said, I would love that, love that. So with his self-determination money, the two of them went to, it's called the Peers Group, and they have a trainer that works with them. And that's what this young man did. And so what they would do is they would go to their peers group, learn a skill, and then when they went out into a natural environment, the group with his playing Dungeons and Dragons, his his partner would give him prompts. Hey, did you ask them this or did you see this? And they were able to practice. And this was just the most beautiful thing that I saw. And when you think about it, think about all the things that he was accomplishing with this one task. I was getting a break, so we were using respite. He was getting speech prompts. He was getting social skills. He was getting transportation. He was getting social rec. So with this one thing, look at all the areas we were able to hit with his self-determination program. And that's not the only area of his life. We have different areas of how he worked on his employment, how he's working with his school, personal goals he has for, if there gets to be a point, he right now doesn't want to move out, but at some point he may want to. So he's learning other skills for that. So this is to me the power of self-determination. He is so happy. He's hired the people that he wants to spend time with. He's doing the things that he loves. And so that's a bit of a story of what self-determination can look like. So now let's go into a little bit of the nuts and bolts so you understand, well, okay, well, what does that mean for, how does the program actually work? So let's start with who is eligible. So any regional center client is eligible, but you have to be a regional center client. So if you're in 1 to 3, they call it 0 to 3 for the ones younger than 1, and you are an early start, you are technically not a regional center client because early start is actually funded by another source, even though regional center provides it. So under the age of 3, you may not be eligible, but there are some people who are born with a qualifying diagnosis that they can immediately go into regional center services. So what you would want to do is if you're under the age of 3 and interested in going in, you would just ask your service coordinator, are we status 2? That's what it's called. So to be a regional center client, you are called status 2. There's a little transition age there. If they're 4 years old, you could possibly be in the kind of a little bit of a new program that they put in. So if at age 3 they still need services, but they haven't had a diagnosis yet, then they could be not quite a regional center client. So if they're between 1 and 4, you want to ask your service coordinator. Anybody older than that and you're in the regional center, you are eligible. Now, you have to be living in the community. And what does that mean? Well, living at home, living with roommates, living in a group home, anything like that is considered living in the community. If you live in a hospital or a care facility, but you're planning on moving out, then you could be eligible for a self-determination program. If you plan on staying in one, then you cannot be in the program. But so in general, most of the people in regional center qualify to be able to be in this program. Okay, let me explain a little bit about how it works and how you would enroll in this program. I want to start by saying it's part of the regional center. The regional center is a government agency and there's bureaucracy involved. It's going to take time. So plan on it taking some time. Right now, if you started the whole process, we tell people to plan around 7 to 9 months to transition in. So this isn't something like, I want to be in the program tomorrow, plan on it. You will be you will receive your traditional services until the day you switch to self-determination. So there will be no gap in service. So even though it takes 9 months, you're still getting your services along the way. So don't worry about that. You will always be receiving your services. You start the process by let your service coordinator know, I'm going to go into the self-determination program. And they can't say you can't or you don't want to. Remember, this is your choice. This is your option. You would go and do an orientation. So there is one through State Council of Developmental Services, SCDD, that is online. It's a 2-hour orientation. Some of the regional centers have their own that you can attend theirs. And you'll get a certificate at the end. You give that to your service coordinator, and you were kind of off and running. The next thing you want to do is find the people who are going to help you, support you doing this. And one of them would be a person-centered planner. The person who often does this is called an independent facilitator. We've got lots of new words and terms. I don't know why they have to make up all these acronyms and things in it, but there is a learning curve for self-determination program. And so kind of be prepared for this learning curve. You're going to do that person-centered plan that we talked about already. I'm a impatient person. So when I first started looking at this, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do quick person plan. I don't even want to think about this. Luckily, somebody said, no, 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 slow down, do this. This is a really fun exercise. And so we did. And I enjoyed it so much. My son enjoyed it so much. So spend time, get a great person-centered plan. It's going to be the foundation for your whole program. After you do the person-centered plan, you will meet to have a budget. Now, I don't want anybody to panic because typically the reason people are looking at the self-determination program is they weren't getting the services or they didn't have the right services for them in the traditional system. So the budget starts at what you spent in the last 12 months. Not what was authorized for you, but what you actually utilized. But don't worry, that's not where it's going to end. So that's where it's going to start. And then this is where your person-centered plan comes in. It's going to kick in. You're going to look at what were the traditional services that you needed that would have been beneficial to you. This budget is based on what would have been spent on you had you stayed in the traditional system. So as I said for my son, social rec was something he needed, but we tried all of them. They didn't work. So it had kind of just fallen off his IPP. It had fallen off to the wayside. Well, we went back in and asked for it and said, well, had he stayed in, this is what he would have needed. You just didn't happen to have the right vendor for him. So you build your budget. This is a negotiation. This is the part that's going to take the longest. If you're starting with low to no services and you want to add a service, you have an unmet need and you're saying, okay, we think that we need this service. Either it wasn't offered to you, they didn't have the right vendor for whatever reason. You want to add it, and it's something that requires an assessment. You have to get that assessment in order for them to add that money into your budget, and that's what takes time. I think everybody in this room, because you all have transition age, you know how long that takes to get those assessments done, and so that's where the time comes in. Once you all agree on the budget amount, then you're going to create your spending plan. That's the fun part. That's when self-determination comes live. That's when we start looking at that person-centered plan. What are the things he wants to do? How am I going to help him accomplish these? How are we? And so in self-determination, it has all their own service codes, and they have a lot more options. They have so many more things that you can do in self-determination. And then after you do the spending plan, then you're going to if you have any existing services that you need to continue on, you want to make sure they get set up with your financial management service. So they don't just hand you the money in that budget because we would all, go to Hawaii and sit on a lovely beach. So what happens is the only required vendored service you have to have in self-determination is a financial management service. They're going to pay for all those things in your spending plan. They're going to, if you hire employees, they're going to take care of all the taxes and all of those things and the payroll. If you, when you have invoices, if you want to purchase anything, they're going to do all of that. So the money never comes to you. And this is important because if our loved ones are on SSI, you have that $2,000 cap, right? So this will not impact your benefits at all. So you don't have to worry about that. So once you do all those things, yay, you're in the self-determination program. So let me give you a little bit of a comparison between the traditional system and self-determination program, because for me, that kind of helps me understand what's going on. The first thing that I like to way I describe it is the traditional system, you need to use vendored services. In most cases, they have a few exceptions, but in general, you're using their vendored services. I like to think of this as the traditional system is like an HMO, and you work within their network. And the self-determination program is like a PPO. You're not required to use those people in the network. So in self-determination program, you do not have to use vendored services. You can use anybody. You can pay your local karate studio. You can have a local art studio or a running club or whatever that you have in your neighborhood. What you cannot do, though, is avoid those generic resource rules. You still, so sometimes I hear people say, oh, I want to go into self-determination program because I don't like the speech therapist at my school, or I don't like the occupational therapist. You can't avoid those. You still have those same rules around the generic resource has to be accessed first. But other than that, you have a lot of flexibility, a lot of things that you can do. Now, in the traditional system, those rates are set. All those vendored rates, they are set. And even though they're going through the rate study now and they're kind of updating them, it took them 10 years to update them. So in some cases, the rates were very low, which made it very hard for us to get and keep providers, especially those direct service providers. And for our family, this was really difficult, like especially around respite. Somebody coming into our house, my son didn't like strangers necessarily coming into our house. And with the respite care, it was somebody different almost every single time they came. We didn't have any choice who was coming, and we ended up just not being able to use it at all. Well, in the self-determination program, you can set the rate. You are limited by how much you have to spend in your budget. You need to make sure that you can afford this, but you have so much more flexibility. So think about this. That respite agency that the regional center was paying, and I'm just going to throw a number out there, this probably is not the accurate one. Let's say they're paying them $50 an hour, and they're the direct person who's coming out to your home, that direct service provider, was probably making minimum wage. That's a lot of room for you to be able to say, well, I'm going to hire somebody directly and I can pay them more than that minimum wage. And what we've found personally and with a lot of my clients is that being able to pay them more means they stay longer. Also, we get to pick who to hire. And so we're hiring, you can hire family members, you can hire friends, you can hire their favorite teacher who's off in the summer and wants to work, or their, whoever that works for you, you can hire. There's one exception to that, two actually. You cannot be paid to take care of a minor, your minor child. They consider that parental responsibility. So a parent of a minor cannot be paid, and a spouse cannot be paid to care for their spouse. Other than that, as long as the person is legally able to work in the United States and can pass a background check, and they're over the age of 18, then you can hire them. So this is great. For us, for me personally, the idea of hiring was the scariest thing when I started this. It hasn't been that. that hard for us. You will always have support. That independent facilitator, if you want to hire one, you are not required to use one, but if you want to hire one, they are there to help you, and they can help with all of these things. You determine how many hours and what hours are going to come. I think one of the things I struggled with the vendored services, they would basically say, okay, it's 3 o'clock on Wednesdays and you need to be there. It's like, Wednesdays were a terrible day for him because, school got out early or whatever. And you had to fit their schedule. My son is a night owl, and he is at his best if he goes to bed at 3 in the morning and then gets up at like noon and does his stuff in the afternoon. And that's how his life is organized now. That's his clock. And he is so much happier doing things in those time. And he's so much more productive. So we hire them. They come when he wants, who he wants, and he can switch I like the flexibility to switch services. So for something like social rec, you know how hard it is at the regional center to get a social rec, and you kind of like, you get this one and you're like, okay, my son likes to change his mind. And in self-determination, we could say, okay, well, this month he's going to go do, this karate class. He actually was doing a lightsaber class. And then, okay, well, he got tired of that after maybe 1 or 2 months, and now he's going to go try something different. He's going to go take this art class. So there's this much more flexibility on what you can do in it. So in the traditional system, the service coordinator really is managing those services. They pick the vendors, they get them paid, they're paid through the regional center. You really have nothing, you don't have to worry about any of those things. This is where that responsibility comes in for you. In the self-determination program, we talked about having that financial management service, but you are going to be making sure that if somebody's invoicing you, that the invoices get over to the financial management service to get paid. If you have employees, you're going to make sure you're going to approve their hours and say, yep, they were here, and do that. So you do have a bit more responsibility here. What I like to think about is that when I was in the traditional system, I put in a lot of work and I wouldn't always get something out of it. So I might be arguing for a service, and maybe after arguing and arguing, it was denied and we never got it. Or we got one and it was okay, but not exactly what we wanted. What I'm finding is, yes, I'm putting work in, but what work I do put in is very fruitful. So he's getting what he needs. And so, I think it's a good trade-off. And I will absolutely tell you, it gets easier the longer you're in, because once you've learned how your financial management service works, you get in a groove. And so we're in year 4, we're on cruise control. So there is, like I said, a learning curve, but it gets easier. So there are a few facts and questions I often get. So I'm going to start by answering those, which is, am I still a regional center client? Absolutely. So the self-determination program is a different way of receiving regional center services. You are still a regional center client, and that means all the same protections apply to you. So you have fair hearing protections. You can have a 4731 complaint if you need to have one. You also have the support of that service coordinator. You are going to have an annual IPP still. If you have a major life change and something happens and you need new services or something has changed, there you'll still have the support of your service coordinator. The question is, can I hire family or friends? So we already talked about that. So yes, you can, with those few limitations that we talked about. People will ask, if I go into self-determination program and I realize this isn't working or it's not working for me, can I go back to the traditional system? Absolutely. You can absolutely go back at any time. If you at that point say, oh, wait, I do want to be in self-determination, then you have to wait 12 months before you switch back to the self-determination program. So you can't switch back, forth. But if you're in and it's not working. Now, here's the interesting thing. I have not yet met a person that wanted to go back. So it's an option for you to go back, but I've never met anybody who wanted to. And then the last one, which we talked a little bit about already, was can I use this to pay for school district services because I'm unhappy with them? So I'm going to say not necessarily, because it's really the same rules as the traditional system, which is if if you get a denial from the school district and you get a denial from your insurance, then at that point a regional center service could kick in. So if you are able to get those denials and the regional center would have paid, then yes, you can do them in self-determination, but you still kind of have to jump through those hoops. Now, this was just a little bit of a teaser overall what self-determination program is. If you want to get more in depth, I recommend go to that orientation. Now, I co-train with state council on their orientation. It is 2 hours. We jokingly call it like a fire hose of information at you. There is so much information that comes to you. I personally am one of those people that I'm more like a just in time, like don't tell me too much, tell me it when I need it. And so what we're doing is a complete guide to self-determination program, and we're going to meet once a month on the first Tuesday from 12 to 1, and we're going to go step by step walking through that enrollment process and go a little bit more in depth. And then you can ask lots of questions. So if you've been to the orientation and you have any more questions or new questions like, oh, I didn't ask this, or I didn't think to ask this back then, a great place for people who are enrolling, who want to come and learn more. It's free, it's on Zoom. I will drop the registration links in chat in just a moment. The other one that we have is a lunch meeting, and it's the third Tuesday of every month from noon to 1. And what we do is everybody come, bring your lunch. It's casual. We invite a financial management service so you can start meeting different financial management services. And we ask providers to come because it's so great to meet new providers and get ideas. We always invite our independent facilitators to come. So if you're looking for one, it's a great place to start looking for any assistance. So please come join us. We love to have you. Again, both of these will go in the chat in just a moment. And we are currently building our site. It's called the Complete Guide to SDP.org. It is not finished. It's going to be built as we go here, but the first parts are already there. So please feel free, take a look at it. The other place that has lots of information about self-determination program is the Department of Developmental Services. If you don't know who they are the ones who contract all the 21 regional centers. So they're the ones who kind of run the whole show, and they have a great SDP site here, lots of questions answered, and so that's a really good resource. And that's it for my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing so we can pop up here.
Yes, indeed. That was a whirlwind, but lots of good information. So, a few questions put together. Kristianna, where do you find IFs? You mentioned the lunch series, but where else could you find IFs? Where do you find FMSs? You mentioned the lunch series, also a good place. And the $1,000,000 question, how do you find and retain good staff? So why don't we start off with a nice,
Oh, wow, you
nice
gave me some
snowball.
good ones.
Snowball.
You're not going easy on me. So to start with, to find an independent facilitator, first of all, our first meeting in June is all about how to find that staff. So I'll go much more in depth there. So if you're looking, do come to that lunch. We're going to record them so you can watch them afterwards if you can't make it at that time. So places to find a good independent facilitator. There is a website that I will put in the chat which is a place to start. Go to your local volunteer advisory committee. So every single regional center has a volunteer self-determination program advisory committee. And at these, and each committee is given money to spend for outreach. And so from that, go to the committee. Sometimes the independent facilitators are there. Sometimes find out what services that committee is offering. Some of them have support groups. Those are a great place to meet independent facilitators, or to ask people in your community, Hey, who are you using? Do you like them? All of those things. Um, Word of mouth is great. State Council also has a list, which I will also put in the chat in just a moment. And so I will tell you right now, there is absolutely a shortage. It is we know there is a lot of demand for independent facilitators. The other things that the local volunteer advisory committees might be offering is coaching. So if you really can't find an independent facilitator, you can use a coach to help you go into it. So those are all my ideas for finding independent facilitators. The second one was, how do you select your financial management service? Now, if you're working with an independent facilitator, they're going to be able to help you. There are, I think we are up to 26 different ones. Now, there is no one right or perfect one. You're looking for the one that's right or perfect for you. So they're all private businesses. They all do things a little bit differently. And what you will find as you get to the point, once you've created your spending plan, you're going to kind of have an idea of what types of services am I looking for. You'll know from yourself, well, I prefer things more online, or I prefer to have somebody that I can call in to talk to individually. So those are things that you're going to think about as you're picking your financial management service. There are some limitations for them, which is not every financial management service works with every regional center. So that helps kind of narrow it down a little bit. Okay, who works with my regional center? Then you also, not every financial management service will take every size budget. So if you have a certain size budget, you can look and say, okay, this one will take my budget size. So that can narrow it down a little bit too. Um, there, that independent facilitator, I think, is going to be a really great help in this. Also, come to the chats, go to those support groups, ask people, who are you using? Do you like them? Also, don't feel like you're locked in. If you try one and you say, this isn't really the right one for me, you can switch. Not always the easiest thing to do. And I recommend you do it on an annual rollover, but so don't overstress yourself about I have to pick the perfect one. Pick the one that you think is going to work and see how it goes. And then the last one was, how do I find and retain employees? I'm going to start with, if I knew the absolute answer to this, I would be a millionaire. This is the $1 million question, not only for self-determination, but I think for almost every industry right now. Finding employees is a very challenging thing. The good news that I found in self-determination, one is because we could hire the people we know and love. That I started with that because I didn't really know how I was going to find these employees. Then I stretched out a little bit. People use Indeed. They post things. What I like to recommend, because what most people do when they go to hire is they start with, I need a person to work with a person with autism, and they need to do these functions. I kind of start the other way around. What I do is I post an ad looking for somebody who wants to play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm looking for somebody who wants to go see horror movies with my son. Because what I don't want is, in the traditional system, when we had aides with my son, or personal assistants, or whoever was with him, they often were not interested in what he was doing. And so they would sit on their phone and sit in the corner and not engage with him. I'm looking for somebody who's actually into what he's into. And that makes that retention so much easier. So that's how I recommend finding the right people and having that retention, being able to pay them a reasonable salary. Those are the three things that I say really are the key to finding the people, having the retention, and it becomes where they say to me so often, I can't believe I get paid for this. I don't feel like I'm working. I'm doing what I love. And it shows in their engagement with my son. And I think that's my answer to those three kind of tough questions.
Yeah, very, very well answered. Thank you. I'm just going to direct everyone's attention to the evaluation again that I just put in the chat once again. I have about a third of the folks answering it. I like it about 75, 80%. So if we can keep going it, 4 easy questions. I promise you, they're really easy. In the time that I have been asking you to do it, you could have been filling it out and done. Okay, thank you. Um, so, Kristianna, uh, somebody is trying to get back into the regional center after having been an early start. And, so maybe just a short comment on that. But if somebody is just going back into the regional center, can they go directly into SDP?
They could. Um, that would be a situation where I would say, expect it to take a little bit of time. So you may want to say, I'm going to start whatever traditional service you're ready to give me right now, today, while I'm doing that transition. Because I don't want you to wait. If it's going to take you 9 months, I don't want you to wait the 9 months. So I would start that SDP transition. And what they'll do is they'll base your budget on the median rate of those services that you would have had. But there are certain services they don't need any sort of assessment that they can give you right up front, like respite, those kind of things. So I would say take those immediately and as you're building your pieces. So kind of a do both.
Okay. Uh, let's see. Um, you were talking about assessments, and there are a couple of questions about assessments. And I think maybe you, excuse me, you should talk about what you were saying about assessments as opposed to the person-centered plan being the assessment for life is kind of what I call it. But I think this was around, are IEPs accepted as assessments? Who was going to be taking the assessment, the family or the regional center? So maybe just loop back to those for a minute, please.
Absolutely. So there are certain services at regional centers that before they can give them to you, they need an assessment to determine how many hours you will get. And so a good example would be like adaptive skills or any sort of behavioral services. And it sometimes varies by regional center. There are some regional centers that might require an assessment for social skills class, and some of them do not. So your service coordinator will tell you this is something that requires one. And typically they want the service provider to come meet with you, determine if this is an appropriate service, and they establish a series of goals that they're going to work on. The types of services that typically require assessments are typically what they call time limited, meaning they don't expect them to go on forever. They also tend to be services that are therapeutic. So you often don't need an assessment for something like a social rec or those kind of things. What they're usually it's something that's a therapeutic thing they want to have an assessment for. So that's what I meant by they can't add it to that budget until they have that done. It doesn't mean once you get that you're required to use that service though in self-determination. I know it seems weird. You're getting an assessment for something you may never use, but that's how the system works. And that's how they determine how many hours. So the regional center is required to certify that this is the amount of money that would have been spent on you had you stayed in. And that's why they take it very seriously that if they ever get audited, they would need to show, yep, we had an assessment. They said they would need X amount of hours, and that's what we based the budget on. Oops, you're muted.
I am on mute. I'm talking to myself. I'm not on mute, am I? And I am on mute. Okay. All right. So to clarify, services like for speech therapy or respite care, it can be without a, a, a provider that is not vendored with the regional center. They could be qualified professionals who are not vendored. I read something recently and it confused me, so I wanted to ask you, and it could be that I just read it wrong, but something about if there are service providers like agencies and you want to use the agency in SDP, that they have to be vendored?
So we misuse the term vendor and self-determination program.
Ah,
We
okay.
are not required to use any vendor services. Unfortunately, the financial management services, if hires somebody, let's say I hire a respite agency, they need to vendor, which actually what I say is they have to onboard with the financial management service to give them the information so they can pay their invoices. That's the only requirement for so if you're familiar with the regional center, vendorization is a huge process. They have to have program plans and all this kind of stuff. So it's nothing like that. So what they really have to do is they have to sign up with the financial management service. They use the term, I keep trying to get everybody to stop calling it vendoring it, calling it provider onboarding or something so it's not so confusing. But so yeah, so it's they're signing up so they can get paid.
They can get paid, right? So they have their business license or their, things
Exactly.
like that. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So, we know 21 regional centers, 22 different ways of doing things, right? So, someone is saying their regional center allows them to select any vendors they want for social rec. There's a cap on how many hours a year they can use. So what's the benefit to switching to SDP?
So it's not just social rec. We take that dollar amount and you can spend it however you want. And you talked about they have a cap, how much social rec you can have. So in the traditional system, they have what they call purchase of service policies or standards. They call them both. And so every regional center, there's this huge list of what services can be offered through regional centers. Not every regional center offers every one of those services. They decide because there's 21 of them and they're a private nonprofit. These are the services we're going to offer and these are the rules we're going to have for them. So they can have a rule like we only provide 4 social rec per year. You're limited to it. You could have another regional center that says you can have unlimited. You could have another one that says we only give 1 per year. So that's the traditional system. When you go to self-determination, those standards do not apply anymore. So if you said, well, I actually think I'm going to be the happiest if I spend almost all of my money on social rec, you could spend all of your money doing social rec. If you're doing, so that's kind of where the difference comes in is those rules go away and you're not just limited on, so yes, so in the traditional system, most of them did not have social rec when they reinstated it. They didn't have the vendors anymore. So what they did is say, you can go pay for your own and we'll reimburse you, right? In the traditional system that's called participant directed services. And if you like your other vendored services, like you have other things, you have an adult day program that you like, or you have the other things that you like, and that's working for you, I would honestly say I would stay in the traditional system. It's easier. You don't have to manage any of these things. This is really a program for the people where those services are not working and they don't have vendored services that are working. So that's kind of the argument. My goal is we want everybody to be in the right program for them. So, if traditional with participant directed works for you, I think that's wonderful. And you should absolutely do that and stay there.
Okay, thanks. Now, someone's asking about partial SDP. Can you use SDP partly and then use traditional behavioral services the regional center might offer for the rest?
Unfortunately, no. It's either or. But there's nothing that prevents you from paying a vendored service other than that vendored service may not agree to take financial management service payment. So if they are, so some of the vendored services are like, yeah, sure, I'll invoice the financial management service and then you can continue with them. If you do have one of those kind of services that you really like, you've got an ABA that you really like and you do not want to lose, check with them if they're willing to do that before you even start that huge enrollment process, right? And then you kind of have a decision to make. If they say, no, we won't do it, then you're going to have to kind of decide. Like I said, some of them are willing to do it and some of them aren't.
Okay, I like this question. Not that I don't like all the questions, but what about ABA services? Son needs additional hours, insurance denies it. Can self-determination provide those additional hours?
So you would have the same rules in order to get this as you would in the traditional. So my assumption is you want it added to your budget because ABA is expensive. So you would go and you're as you're negotiating your budget, say, I've got the denials, show them the denials, and if regional center agrees to it, then yes, they can put the money in to your budget, and then you can use it in your spending plan, and pay for it then. Now, I will say some regional centers, while they're not supposed to, whatever's directly in your budget be used in your spending plan, there should be no connection. But some, when they give you something like ABA as an exception, do want to see it over on the other side. I don't agree with that philosophy, but it's just something to be aware of, that they may be asking you to do that.
Answered that one. Somebody wants to know if they can use your services for school support.
Use self-determination program services for schools?
I think use SDI. Use SDI as an agency to support them, to help support them in school. Because I think you mentioned you were an advocate for free day.
Oh, so I am a retired special education advocate. I attended probably 700 IEPs a year for decades. I am not doing IEPs any longer. I started out
I
with
hear you,
black
sister.
hair.
I hear
Every one of these streaks is an IEP meeting, just so you know. So
you.
thank you very much, but I do not do school education advocacy any longer.
Let's see. Could you provide some examples of the type of services a local regional center can offer aside from respite? The only service our regional centers provided was using a social group, and my son got tired of it quickly, which really speaks volumes to why self-determination is so important. So maybe just hammer that one more time.
Absolutely. And what we found is that one, nobody goes, if you're getting an independent facilitator, you're getting an advocate. And what we find a lot is that person-centered plan is going to tease out the other services that they do offer. So that independent facilitator needs to be an expert in traditional system services, so they know what to ask for. So there is a whole list of services that they could possibly ask for. What age did they say what age it was?
No.
So there's school age services, and then there's adult services that are available. And it's anything from adaptive skills, independent living skills, and supported living skills are kind of the continuum of skills. If they want to learn things like how to do their laundry, or how to keep better time, or how to do, so all the kind of things that you might learn for independent living. So the adaptive is for school age. Independent living is for an adult who lives at home, and supported living is typically for an adult who lives outside of the home. Then you have things like all this. So you've got social rec and social skills, which are two different things. Social skills is kind of like, it sounds like you already had something like that. It's a class, it's structured, those kind of things. And then social rec is, I want to join a karate class. I want to, those kind of things. You've got, oh gosh, there are just so many different things. You do have your medical ones. So you have your behavioral, you have things around speech. If they need assisted technology, there are things in there that, people to teach you for assisted technology. I will dig around and find a list for you. But you also can find there is a list for all the services that your regional center offers. Should be on every single website. Every single regional center's website is required to have one. So I also recommend go and look at that, because like I said, it can vary a little bit by regional center. I feel like I'm missing some good ones in there too.
There are many good ones, and I think we're going to miss some good ones, unfortunately. Um, Somebody's asking about an age limit for STP. You did touch on the 1 to 4, so you need to ask your service coordinator if you have a 1-year-old to 4-year-old. Otherwise, no age limit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And why it takes so long to enroll? With another $1 million question.
I'll tell you that there's over 400,000 participants statewide in regional center services, and there's just right around 7,000 in self-determination program. That means there's a very good chance your service coordinator has never had a client go into self-determination program. So sometimes we're learning together. Your service coordinator this is the first time they've done it and they're figuring it out. Um, some of it just takes time to get those services and those things. What I do recommend is very politely always keep nudging them, stay on top of them, don't let it go too long. Because and the other thing I'll say is our service coordinators are so overworked. A lot of them have maybe 80 clients. And so if there's one that's difficult, their self-determination, they didn't know what to do it, sometimes they kind of set it over to the side. Ooh, I'll get back to that. And then they kind of don't get back to it. So nudging them along, keeping on top of them absolutely helps.
And I think we have time for just two more questions. And one is, can you talk about how the regional center would finance the independent facilitator? When and how, and the person-centered plan, and all that, just to touch on that, please.
Great question. So when you ask for the part where they're going to help you transition into the program because you are still a traditional system client, it's like a normal vendored service in the traditional center. So they're going to pay for all of that. You do not have to pay. So if you ever have an independent facilitator that says that you need to pay privately, run. They're not a good independent facilitator. It's all paid for by the regional center. So they can pay for a person-centered planner and they can pay for what they call a self-directed support. And that they will go from the person-centered plan all the way into transitioning you in. Those are both paid for by the regional center. And your IF has to kind of take care of their invoicing and taking care of that. Don't worry about it. Once you get into self-determination program, you can continue their services. The people who offer these services are called independent facilitators, and they will not increase your budget to pay for it, but you would use your spending plan to pay for them. So that's how you pay for them.
Okay. And I'm just going to direct everybody's attention one last time to the English evaluation, which is in the chat. Please click on it, answer those 4 simple questions. And the last question of the night that I've been saving, Kristianna, is, first of all, thank you so much for your presentation. It says also in the chat, people say, wear your gray hair as a badge of courage because you've earned it. Okay. So,
I do. I earned this.
So with SDP, are we as parents, do we still continue to guide our adult children's lives? I like to call them adults. Or is the adult doing it themselves? So I think that's a nice one to sort of
That
finish
is a
up on.
beautiful one. And part of why my hard thing to think about, and I think about it a lot, is what happens for my son when I'm gone. And so my goal really is for him to have as much independence as possible. So I am letting him make as many decisions as he can. He will always need 24-hour care support. There will always need to be somebody who is providing these additional things. So a little bit of both. Yes, I will still be able, and sometimes he makes decisions. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. But if he doesn't make them and doesn't fail, he never learns to make them. This is how we learn. This is how we grow. He is more independent now than I ever imagined he possibly could be. He learned to do Uber on his own, which I could never have imagined. So I think that self-determination does not mean you have no say as a parent. I'm still mom. I will always be mom. I will probably always be overprotective to a certain degree, but we also need to make sure that they have the opportunity to make decisions and make mistakes.
Well, I love that. And the clock on the screen says it's 7:30. I am so proud that we're going to end on time. Thank you so much, Kristianna. You're getting lots of love. We really appreciate your spending your time and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. And thank you, everyone, for coming, because without the audience, we wouldn't have questions unanswered right now. So I apologize for that. But we will send out tomorrow the slides, so you'll have Kristianna's contact information. Lots of people want that. So sign up for the lunch series if you're in SDP already, and if you're not, sign up for the new one. I forget what that's called. Complete Guide to
Complete guide.
SDP. Complete Guide to SDP. Sign up for those. You'll be learning so much. And thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. Any last words, Kristianna?
Thank you so much for having me. It was so enjoyable. I loved all the comments and all the questions. And I could not grab the list of the regional center services. I will find them so you can email them out with to everybody.
Okay.
I'll get it to you right away.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, you will get all the links in the chat. Don't think that you won't. I'm very good about copying, and that's why I say keep the questions at the Q&A, because that's what I'm looking at in the chat. And thank you. Thanks, everybody.